Okay, halfway through the week. Happy Wednesday. Remember, I didn't like the happy days, and then now I do that every time. So I'm I'm a sucker. Sometimes I criticize things, but I criticize things because I actually maybe really like them. So who knows? Okay, we're here for Wednesday's class. El Pastino results are in. Beautiful. Just you guys. Just such a pleasure working with you guys. When we go back live, we'll probably look at writing original scores, like I said. But for now, this is terrific. It's getting you to listen, expand your mind. Sometimes you think when you listen to music, it's not going to do anything. But I think the unconscious takes note when we hear something new, when we experience something new, and we think, well, I don't know, maybe it's not doing anything. But later, in your dreams or whatever, something. The mind expands in a way. New possibilities arise when you hear a new piece of music, which is what I want you to get to do. And you guys have been doing for years, just listening to something that you wouldn't normally listen to. It's very good brain power, good exercise for that. So very proud of you guys. Master Piazzolla was such a pleasure yesterday. I love that tango music. I mean, I don't dance, and I'm nervous about that, but it's really fun music. And he was such a genius for incorporating kind of Bach classical music on the accordion, which is typically, for just regular polka tango music. That's great. But then said, I'm going to study with Nadia Boulanger. I'm going to get a very traditional, because she was a traditional teacher, and get that education and see what I can do with that. And what he was doing in the 60s with his quintet was just revolutionary and very, very fun. And I want to keep the funness because I'm all about fun. And so we're going to look at another composer that's just one of my favorites. Really great that we looked at a while ago that my brother introduced me to. So this guy's Mexican. So yesterday, Argentinian, composer, and Monday he was Argentinian, Bacalov. Today this guy's Mexican, so it's just a Latin flavored week. So let's take a look at Esquivel. Esquivel, 1918, born in Tampico. So we were in Georgia with Little Richard, right? We got to get the hell out of Georgia, and we got to go down to Mexico. We're going to go to Tampico, Mexico. This is where Esquivel's born. He lives a long life. He dies at 83, dies in 2002. So lives a long time, and as you're going to see, as you're going to hear, I mean, the music is very out there, very, it's jazz, Latin, lounge music. It's, he grows up in Mexico City for the most part. When he's 10, his family moves there. But he's self-taught as a piano player. He's a piano prodigy. He learned from recordings and learned from books. And by the time he was 17, he was a band leader in Mexico. And by the 40s, he had made a name for himself as a leader of a 22-piece orchestra, and that was on the radio. So all these things you're hearing are his arrangements. And when there's a piano, that's him playing the piano. All the arrangements are tightly orchestrated, except when you hear the piano, that's improvisation. That's improvised by him. He meets a comedian when he's young, and Penseco. Of course, we all know Penseco's, right? Famous comedy album. No, maybe he was really funny, but he starts writing background music for this comedian guy in Mexico. And he forms a small band and provides background music. But Penseco said, I want you to write music that is, he would give him scenarios, like write kind of funny music for me. And he would say, write like a Russian guy is walking in China. And Esquivel would have to think, well, what would a Russian guy walking in China sound like? And Esquivel said that's when his imagination started sparking with different ideas of surreal, absurd, quirky colors in his head. He was very influenced by Van Gogh because he loved all the colors Van Gogh used, and Esquivel used, as you can hear, colors are just pulsating out of the music. So he kind of got a good following in Mexico with leading this band, and then was discovered in the United States and brought to record in about 1957, and starts recording in Hollywood, moves to Hollywood, and the album, his big album, Other Worlds, Other Sounds, comes out in 1959. I don't know what brings me back to this year all the time, because I know John Pays has pointed it out, and it's true. I should write a book at some point, 1959. It seems like everything happened, but we're not going to talk about every single event. But musically, in 1959, when this album comes out, what's on the top charts? Mac the Knife, Bobby Darin. That's on the top. Another one, another favorite of mine, Venus by Frankie Avalon. That's on top of the charts in 1959. And of course, we know the most famous jazz album that changed the whole world is Kind of Blue, right? By Miles Davis. That comes out in 1959. So this is when Esquivel is on the scene in America. So he's kind of one of the founders of lounge music. And it's almost hard to describe lounge music without just listening to it, So it's lounge, jazz, and Latin flavors. But what does that mean? How do you get that sound? So the arrangements, the orchestrations, very flashy, full of textures, but they're changing all the time. There's nothing that kind of gets to... He doesn't really just let things kind of vamp. There's splashes everywhere, including voices, and including syllables that are ooh, wah, wah, or pow, or all these words that, are kind of gibberish, but he said that he would make himself... he would crack himself up when he was writing the charts, because he thought it was just so humorous well, instead of having lyrics to the song, why don't we just use the singers as instruments kind of, and just make them have sounds. He would use kind of a traditional, saxophone, brass band, but guitars and xylophones and electronic instruments, but they didn't have synthesizers really, so he would kind of create his own synthesizers he used a lot of percussion instruments, and all those piano runs are him, those virtuistic piano runs. It's instrumental pop music that's not really... he would cover, he wrote a lot of the music, but then he would also cover very famous songs as well. But obviously they would sound nothing like... his music sounded nothing like anybody else's music. So it's very idiosyncratic, meaning he was very obsessed with perfection, and everything was very tightly orchestrated, even though it sounds... Well, I don't know. It sounds like a mess, but it's a controlled mess. It's not avant-garde at all, for the most part. It's exotic. There's a lot of exotic percussion. You hear a lot of zuzu syllables, harpsichords. He would throw anything out there, and he said that RCA gave him freedom to do whatever he wanted. And also his recording style was very innovative. I don't quite understand this, but he would have two orchestras, two bands in different studios, and he would be in the middle, and they would kind of do this virtual they would do this simultaneous recording together. So he was very interested also in the studio, and Phil Spector was very influenced by Esquivel, particularly with his use of stereo and mono and panning. And if you're listening to this on headphones, you'll hear that there's music that goes this way, and it's just so much fun. It's a cacophony, it's a circus of just fun music. Sinatra loved this. He was really big in the 50s and 60s and created a whole genre of music. You never hear these instruments anymore. or at least back then, with a theremin. I mean, he's using just stuff to get these sounds that are so brilliant and so clever, so quirky, but so much fun, right? I mean, for the most part, is it musical? Highly musical and highly fun. Some of it can remind us of Predis Prado that we did months ago. Remember the band leader, Predis Prado? Those were Latin big band music, and his arrangements were incredible. Esquivel is taking this to a whole different realm, in a way that's, he's literally throwing all the bells and whistles in his music. He was a very serious musician, loved conducting, loved being a band leader, loved the spotlight, married 6 times, pretty into alcohol and drugs later in his life, and that's when he moved from Hollywood back to Mexico. Married his nurse, and died of a stroke, but I think had quite a life. He said that what I tried to do was not to follow the style. He said he never wanted to follow the style of what was popular at that time. And that's interesting because those are the people that stand out. Those are the people when you try to be like everybody else, sometimes you get lumped in with everybody else. So I think with art, it's good to stand out. And it's funny that he used his name Esquivel with an exclamation point. He spelled it with that. Who else said I write my music with an exclamation point? Come on, this is the class. I got to quiz you. Who said I liked writing my Wagner, right? Wagner said that I write music with an exclamation point. Well, Esquivel spelled his name with an exclamation point, and isn't it very fitting? The music sounds like that. So he really wanted to make sure that his music, and it's weird, you would think to get a following or to be popular or whatever, that you would follow what's popular at that time, but he completely didn't want to follow what was popular at that time, and that made him stand out, and that worked to his favor. And that's why I'm doing a class on him in 2020 when this music came out in the 60s. That's why we're still talking about him. So stand out in your art. Do what's popular sometimes. Steal a little bit of popularity, and that's good. But then use your gut and intuition and to think in a different direction, with an exclamation point. Maybe I'll start labeling my classes now with an exclamation point. No, my ego's not that big, but I think it's good to think that way sometimes. So, good and healthy. Music's crazy, right? I mean, it's space age bachelor pad music. That's a funny term, and you're like, what does that mean? And then when you listen to this music, you're, oh yeah, space age, and it's like a bachelor pad. That actually really makes sense. What is that? Mixture of jazz, Latin, lounge music, surreal, right? Some of it is just absurd. It's interesting that he loved Van Gogh and loved colors, and it's really interesting with Panseco, the comedian, that it's artists influencing other artists sometimes, because comedian's an artist, and he talks to somebody that knows how to make, compose music and translate this joke into what that would be musically. And that sparked Esquivel's imagination. That's just a different way of approaching things like that. So I just love it. So, in the late 50s, when he moves to Hollywood and records those studio albums, influencing Phil Spector, very interesting because we know more about the Wall of Sound, and we know about, it's just good to revisit because we've learned so much about music, and we have to recap, and there's constant, reminders about where we're coming from and all that stuff. So I hope you're enjoying this. But just flashy music, right? That changes all the time, and it's controlled chaos. It's like a controlled mess because something's grooving for a while and then it just goes crazy, but it's very controlled because it's all orchestrated, and so he was just a genius. So Esquivel, hope you enjoyed that. Okay, tomorrow's LA, back to LA, and then Friday film scoring results for El Postino. Okay, have a great rest of the day. Thanks so much, and love you. Bye.